In last video, we did the first half of factoring, which was our two different types of binomials. Now we're going to go over type 3 and type 4, which is our easy and hard trinomials. So we're still going to be using these steps right here for the rest of this, for factoring, right? So, and this first one here, what makes this an easy trinomial is that my a is 1, right? If I can put a 1 out front of that x squared. So when a is 1, this is considered an easy trinomial, and so we just have x squared plus bx plus c. So first step is to put this into standard form, so it needs to equal 0, and it does. Next step is to factor out the GCF if there is one, but I don't have one here. I can't factor out an x because we have two x's here, one x here, but this 12 has no x's. This 7 is a prime number, and I can't really take anything out of a 1 because 1's only divisible by 1. So we have no GCF, so we're going straight into factoring. For trinomials, I use the diamond method, okay, or I just call it the x. So I'm going to make an x right here, and in this top portion, I'm going to multiply my a times c. My a is 1, my c is 12, so my a times c is 12. My b term is going to go down here, and my b term is what's in front of the x, it's at -7. Look for this sheet right here. So we're using this right here. What's in front of your x squared is your a. What's in front of your x is your b. What your constant is your c. So this is a, b, and c. Okay, so what I'm looking for is two numbers that meet two different criteria. That when I add those two numbers together, we get -7. But when I multiply those two numbers together, I get 12. Now, if you're good at your multiplication tables, this isn't that hard. We get -4 and -3. If you are not good at your multiplication, this can sometimes be the hardest and the trickiest part. What I recommend is for you to write down your multiples if you cannot just look at this and fill this out. So you're going to have to go through all of your multiples. To get to a positive 12, you can multiply 1 times 12 or -1 times 12. But when you add those numbers together, 1 plus 12 would give me 13. And -1 plus a -12 would be a -13, not -7. So those don't work. The next one would be 2 times 6 and -2 times -6. But when you add those together, 2 plus 6 is 8, -2 plus -6 is -8. That's still not to -7. Closer, but not -7. So then the next one would be 3 times 4 and -3 times -4. When you add these together, you get 7. I need a -7. When you add these together, there's my -7. So this is the one that I want to use. So if you cannot look at this, you've got to take the time to write down your multiples and try to figure out what multiplies to this. So start with that. I wrote my multiples of 12 and then figure out which of those multiples of 12 add up to 7 or -7. Okay, so once we have found these two numbers that multiply to my AC and add up to my B, now we can factor. To get to this x squared, that is just x times x. And then these are the numbers that go behind. So this is -4 minus 3. And now that is factored. So once we have factored, now we can use that zero factor property. So we'll have x minus 4 equals 0. So x is 4. And we have x minus 3 equals 0. X is 3. I like checking these because it doesn't take long, and I want you to understand what we are solving for. So x squared minus 7x plus 12. I need to change my window back, so I'm going to go zoom 6 for a standard. And you can see it crosses 3 and 4 right there. And if you want to be sure, you can do trace 3, y of 0, and then 4, still y of 0. Okay, let's try this one here. First thing we need to do is put this into standard form, which means it needs to equal 0. This one doesn't equal 0, so I'm going to subtract my 48 over. I can't just pick up that 48 and put it to the other side, right? You gotta still do the opposite. So subtract that 48 over. Next thing we look for is a GCF. Is there something I can divide out of all 3 of these terms? Hopefully you can see that it's divisible by 2. Plus, it's under the easy trinomial, so my a should be 1, and my a right now is 2. So we're going to divide that 2 out of everything, so that comes out. And that's going to leave me with x squared plus 10x minus 24. Okay, distribute that back. 2 times x squared is 2x squared. 2 times 10x is 20x. And 2 times a negative 48, or sorry, and 2 times negative 24 is negative 48. So now let's go into our x. My a times c is now from my smaller trinomial. So 1 times negative 24 gives me negative 24. My b is 10. What adds up to b but multiplies to ac? Just in case you can't see this, this is the last one. I'm going to kind of write the multiples out. But if you can't fill this out, you've got to start writing your multiples of negative 24 and seeing which one adds up to 10. To get to negative 24, that could be 1 times negative 24 or negative 1 times 24. This one adds up to a negative 23, and this one adds up to a positive 23. So those aren't it. So move to the next one. We have 2 times negative 12 or negative 12 or negative 2 times positive 12. When I add these up here, we get negative 10. So close. Here, they add up to 10. So there it is. Your other multiples of 24 would be 3 times negative 8 and negative 3 times 8 and 4 times negative 6 and negative 4 times 6. But we've already found the 1, and there's only going to be 1. So once you find it, you can stop. But if you can't look at this and fill it out, you've got to list your multiples of your a times c and figure out which of those multiples add up to your b. All right, so we said negative 2 and 12. So now bring down that 2, and this factors to x minus 2, x plus 12 equals 0. Now, because this GCF has no x in it, all that does is gives us smaller numbers to work with here, which makes this factoring part easier. But if I didn't factor out a variable, it is not one of my solutions. I only have 2 solutions here that I could have. These are my 2. So when I do x minus 2 equals 0, we get x equals 2. And when I do x plus 12 equals 0, subtract that 12 over, we get x equals negative 12. I like checking these, so we will check this. I have 2x squared plus 20x minus 48. It needs to be that version here that's all in one. And I'm going to look at my window. I know if my x should be negative 12, my x min doesn't start till negative 10. So I'm going to expand that out to negative 15. And I'm just going to move that over a little bit, 2 to 5. There it is. So when I do trace 2, we get y equals 0, and negative 12, we still get y equals 0. Okay, if you need to, rewind this video, make sure you understand easy before we go to hard. All right, moving on to our last type, these hard trinomials. And again, they're not hard, but they do require more steps. Okay, so my first step is still make sure it equals 0. It does not equal 0, so let's subtract that 3 over. So I have 2x squared minus x minus 3 equals 0. GCF is next, but I don't have a GCF here. This 3 doesn't have an x, and those are prime numbers, so I can't divide anything out. So now let's go to factor. When we factor trinomials, factoring involves our x. Our a times c is now 2 times negative 3, so negative 6, and my b term is negative 1. What adds up to b and multiplies to ac. So please try to pause this video and see if you can fill that out. Okay, I hope you pause that video. So we should have got 2 and negative 3. Okay, or negative 3 and 2. The order here doesn't matter. Okay, when you multiply these together, we get negative 6, but when I add, I get to this negative 1. So here's where it's going to differentiate. I cannot just say, like we did up here in the easy, that this factors to x plus 2 and x minus 3. Because right from the get-go, if what we are doing when we're factoring is undoing that foiling process, when I start foiling this right from the get-go, x times x is only x squared, and this needs to multiply to a 2x squared. So it can't be this. It can't be this simple, right? So what we have to do is called rewriting the middle term. I am going to rewrite this negative x with what we have found right here. So I have 2x squared minus 2x, or sorry, positive 2. So plus 2x minus 3x, and then bring down your minus 3 equals 0. I have taken this term here and I have rewrote it using these. I have not changed my problem at all. If I was to combine like terms, 2x minus 3x is negative x. So I have not changed this problem at all. I've unsimplified it, if you will. Once we rewrite this middle term using this one here, I now have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So now we're going to factor by grouping. I'm going to group these first 2 terms together and pull out the GCF. The GCF of 2x squared and 2x is 2x. And that's going to leave me with an x plus 1. Do the same thing here. What is my GCF out of negative 3x and negative 3? You might be thinking 3, and 3 is technically correct. But I typically want this first term right here to be positive. So to turn this positive, I'm going to take out a -3. So negative 3x divided by -3 is x, and -3 divided by -3 is 1. Now, if you notice, we have the same number here in parentheses. That should always happen when you factor by grouping. So now my answer is what you have in parentheses once. This is x plus 1. And then your second binomial is what you took out as GCS, 2x minus 3. Now we have factored, because now I have x's with only to the first power. So if we take these and set these equal to 0, x plus 1 equals 0, subtract that over, and x equals -1. And here, I don't have room, but we're going to add the 3, divide by 2, and we're going to get x equals 3/2. If I use my calculator to check, I'm going to put this in right here, where it's all on one side of the equation. So 2x squared minus x minus 3. I'm going to go zoom 6 to change that back to a standard. And you can see it right there, but we can go trace -1, y of 0, 3 divided by 2, y of 0. So we did both of those correctly again. Okay. I would rewind the video and rewatch this one. If you did not fully understand it, hit pause and then try to do this one on your own if possible. Okay, so I do hope you have tried this one on your own. Let's see how you did. Okay. First thing we need to do is set this equal to 0. So I need to move this 20 over, but again, I can't just pick it up and move it to the side. You have to do the opposite. The opposite of a -20 is to add it over. So my equation is 18x minus 38x plus 20 equals 0. Next thing we need to do is factor out a GCF. My GCF here is 2, I think. Let's see. 38 divided by 2 is 19. So yes. So we'll have 2 as my GCF. 18 divided by 2 is 9x squared. 38, or -38 divided by 2 is a -19x. And 20 divided by 2 is 10. Now we need to factor. Factor with trinomials involves this x. So my a times c is 9 times 10. My b term is -19. What adds up to b and multiplies to ac? Okay, pause this video if you need more time to figure that out. We should have got -10 and -9. Okay, I cannot say that this equals x minus 10 and x minus 9 because that's not going to multiply to a 9x squared. So what I need to do is rewrite this middle term using these numbers here. So we have 9x squared minus 10x minus 9x, and then bring down your plus 10. If I combine these together, -10x minus 9x gets me back to that -19x. So I haven't changed anything. Now that I have 4 terms, we factor by grouping. So in this first group right here, my GCF is x, and that leaves me with 9x minus 10. My GCF in the second group is what? Okay, notice these almost match, but we have a negative 9x and a positive 10. So we're going to just take out a negative 1 to switch that sign. Negative over negative is positive 9x. Positive over negative gives me a negative 10. Now these match. That's what I need. Okay, so this factors, I'm going to bring down this 2. Factors 2, what we have in those parentheses twice, that comes down once. So 9x minus 10. And then my second binomial will be what? Right here, what my GCFs were. So x minus 1. Now, because this GCF here doesn't have a variable in it, this is not one of my 2 solutions. Here are my 2 solutions. Your GCFs are a solution of 0 when your GCF involves a variable. Okay, I'm running out of room, so I'm going to squeeze this in here. But 9x minus 10 equals 0. Add your 10, divide by 9, and we get x equals 10 over 9. Then here we have x minus 1 equals 0, so therefore x is 1. So if we check this one more time, I'm going to check it right here where it's all on one side. We have 18x squared minus 38x plus 20. Okay, so it only looks like it intersects 1. I think it's because these are so close together. So if I do trace 9 divided by 10, we get 0. And if I do 1, we also get 0. So it just looks like it because it's so close together. If you want to, I verified, using the trace verifies that these are my correct answers. Let's see if I zoom in here to 0 and 2. And I'm going to change this also to negative 1, 1. So there you can see the 2 different x-intercepts. They're just very, very close together.